the Imam Zadullah Khair made a point, and I think we also made that point earlier, but subhanAllah, if you think about it, every single test, think about your life. After today, not only do we want to change our attitude, but wallahi, think about your life. Every single hardship that you have, that you are grateful to Allah after it, it changed your life for the better. You went through a time of hardship, that hardship and challenge that you were grateful to Allah, it made you a better person. You got sick, it changed your life, it got you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You lost something, you're grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it added to you. Always adds to your faith. Always adds to your faith when you're grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Until you reach a point that the brother was talking about, we were talking about earlier, which is what? That when you see the test from Allah, you start to see that it's actually a blessing from Allah. When other people are seeing it as a test from Allah, you are seeing as what? An opportunity to get closer to Allah. We gave the example earlier of the sister that what? That was sick and she had the epilepsy? Epilepsy seizures, okay. So we have two assignments. We need to look up no weapon shall prosper, and we need to check up the medical term. But the point that we're making is that she thought it was a disease, it was sickness, but then she found, you know what, Allah will forgive my sins, it might be a key for me to enter Jannah. This is wonderful. I will stick with it. What is the hardest thing that could ever happen to a parent? To lose their child? The Prophet ﷺ says, on the day of judgment, that person, that child that you have lost, comes to you in the form of what? As a shafi', a reason for you to enter into Jannah. Even what seems to be the worst thing that could ever happen to a parent could be the greatest blessing that happens to them in the day of judgment. Things that are different. And I just, okay, go ahead, sorry.
Just a very quick thing. I think in the same line, you mentioned the story of Joseph alayhi salam. I mean, if you look at the beginning of the story when he was taken from his father, beloved father, and then he became from a free young kid into a slave in somebody's property, basically. And then he ended up in a prison for so many years. So, I mean, if we were in Joseph, for example, like footstep, I'm like, why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took me away from my father? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tested him through that period so he can make him a great thing, and so he can bring all his brothers and family and to become from Bedouin basically into people of royal family.
And subhanAllah, this is a beautiful thing, because like I said, when Allah tests us, He tests us in an area that we're weak. And inshallah in the future we'll talk about sabr more specifically and give a lot of examples. But today even though we're talking about hamd, but it's important to understand, because once we turn that switch, starting from today inshallah, we're going to meet each other in the masjid and outside the street. When someone is asking you, how are you doing? When we turn that switch of, oh brother, the bills and the kids and the school, and we change it to say, alhamdulillah, they are brothers. Think about it. They are brothers who memorize the Quran and pray day and night and are much this and much that, and they fear Allah so much and they worship so much, and yet in Gaza their houses are collapsing on them, yet in Iraq their houses are falling upon them, yet here they're being persecuted and they're being persecuted, and here we are as bad and sinful as we are, and yet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is blessing us. And instead of being grateful for the ni'mah, what do we want to do? We want to sit and complain and And that is what we need to change. We need to make that switch in our minds. That we're grateful for the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in our life. That we're grateful for the children that we have, for the families that we have, that the health that we have. Even the things that we see as not a blessing, the test that we have, that it's a blessing for us. And the brother made a very important point, and that is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tests you in an area, it's for a reason that sometimes you don't see. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted Joseph, to be the minister of finance of Egypt. Not only a minister of finance, but he wanted him to be the best minister of finance. What does that mean? It means that he has to see the worst corruption ever. So what happens? He goes and falls in the house of who? Al-Aziz, Aziz al-Masr, the minister of finance of Egypt. What does he see? A lot of corruption. This person doing this, the wife doing that, they take him into this, even though he's innocent and his innocence is proven. What happens? They throw him in jail. Why? You can't mess up, the corruption. So now that he becomes the Aziz of Misr, Ya ayyuha al-Aziz, massana wa ahlan ad-dur, what does he becomes? He becomes the most just minister of finance. Because he has what? Tastes injustice. For you to reach that point of maturity of goodness, you have to fall in some kind of badness. Musa alayhi salam, Allah wants him to be the leader, the greatest leader of Bani Israel. What does he have to see? The greatest injustice of the leaders. is to grow up in the palace of who? Of Pharaoh, of Fir'aun. And taste the injustice and see people being killed and persecuted and whatever. So that when he becomes the leader of over 700,000 Muslims from Bani Israel, he becomes what? The just leader. So even when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts us through a test, it's for a reason for us to what? To benefit from it. And it's a psychology that we need to change.
The Quran is clear, say, لنبلوكم أيكم أحسن عملا.
نعم نعم.
And as يعني إنسان قد يبلغ يعني يتكلم عن المحبة إلى الله عز وجل، قد تأتي في المحبة تأتي مع البلاء. فكان رجل جاء النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال له إني أحب الله، فقال له أعد للبلاء جلبابا. As much as you go to the degree of loving Allah, you get tested and.
No. You know, the brother made a very important point, which is that the more you claim that you love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the more there has to be some form of sacrifice for it. One of the brothers, he was given a lecture, and he threw out the example, one of the Imams, Imam the Dominican, he gave a very interesting example. He said, and he was talking about sadaqah, and sadaqah to burhan, that when you give charity, you give it, be grateful to Allah, but also it's a proof. And he says, why? Is because what you give, and what you thank, and what you're praising for, shows your degree of love. And he gave a very interesting example. He said when you first get engaged and your fiancé comes up to you and says, honey, you know what? I want to buy this dress for $150. What do you say? Oh, you pull up the credit card. Of course, for you, anything. She says, and I want, you know, this ring for $150. Oh, for you? Sure. Pulls out the credit card. Charge. She says, it's too much money. He says, no, nothing is too much for you. Why? Because what? The love is 100%. Now go to the same house 10, 15 years after they're married. And she says, honey, I want a dress for $150. He says, we have kids and we have bills and we have this. The levels are different. When you truly love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you have to show it with what? With that praise that you're doing, with the great, all of this is a proof of it, as-sadaqat burhan. And that's why we talked about Dawood, that he showed his gratefulness to Allah by what? Not only saying it after the salah, subhanallah, alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, I'm done. But his attitude of the way he fasted, the way he gave charity, the way that he went in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the way he worked, the way he raised his children. His son Sulaiman alayhi salam, Solomon was what? One of the greatest Muslims himself. And that is why the story of Dawood alayhi salam is very interesting. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not randomly just pick Dawood alayhi salam to be a prophet. You know, this man, I'll make him a prophet. No. Because he was a man from day one whose Islam, whose faith in Allah drove him to do miracles. There was an army of 313, the same number of the people of the day of Badr. They were going to fight 100,000. Now if you ask me to go and fight 313, with 313 to fight 100,000, I'll say, man, good luck. I'll take care of your affairs after you die. There's no way 313 are going to defeat 100,000 people. But a little farmer by the name of Dawood had so much faith in Allah and said, what? كم من فئة قليلة غلبت فئة كثيرة بإذن الله. And he joined the army, and we all know the story, whether you read in the Torah or the Quran or the Bible, that he went in there and with a slingshot, full of faith in Allah, trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he fought and he was able to defeat that army. And that is one of the main reasons that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raised this man, because that man was not just a man of talking, was not just a man after salah that says, subhanallah, alhamdulillah, and just done. But he was a man that in his heart was willing to give each and every single thing, even his life, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I know I've went too much, and I know there's a lot of points that we can say, but and says, this is supposed to be a masjid, what would you do? You would say, take it. But to look at the jadal, look what the man said to him. He said, Ya Dawood, I want 40 sheep for it. And he's arguing with Dawood alayhi salam. I'll give me 40 sheep, and I'll give you this house of mine. And Dawood alayhi salam was very excited and said, okay, done. The man looked at him and said, apparently this is a lot more worthy to you. No, Dawood, you know what? Give me 40 horses, because horses are a lot more valuable. Give me 40 horses, and I'll give you my house. Dawood alayhi salam immediately said, yes. The man said,